So, if you want to look at Earth Day and the fact that this weekend was, the weekend where, the day where people celebrate pot a good bit, I suppose. By the way, my song for the day, On a Turntable by The Interrupters. That was what was in my head when I woke up this morning. And I think it's a pretty good song, reflecting on life, reflecting on the world. It's joyous, it's bittersweet, it's a fun melody. It's a great tune. On a Turntable by The Interrupters. But here's the music news for this week, and this was brought to us by, I believe Edwin shared this. So it turns out, in the Haight-Ashbury days of the 1960s, which, by the way, this is also very appropriate because I spent my weekend in San Francisco. Friday, I had the first house show of the year in Boulder Creek, California. Shout out to everyone who showed up. We had an amazing time. And then I went to San Francisco, which isn't too far away, for the rest of the weekend to hang out with my sister. And we made an Easter dinner. It was actually an Easter/Passover dinner because her fiance's Jewish, so we had both meals going on, and that was really cool. I'm not a religious person at all, but it's always nice to have an excuse to just throw a big meal and hang out with friends and family and have a good old time. So we did that. So I was just in San Francisco, and it turns out back in the prime of the Haight-Ashbury days in the 60s, there was a band that went under the radar, and they were an all-female psychedelic band who is finally getting the recognition that they deserve, and they're called Ace of Cups. This is from NPR, Nice Polite Republicans, and I shout out to NPR for being on top of this. When I think of tastemakers that are on the pulse of what's hip and cool, NPR usually comes to my mind first. I'm like, they're always they get it. Although I can't make fun. I'm being a hypocrite right now because this is my first time hearing about this. So NPR beat me to the punch here. So I can't judge too much. I'm willing to poke fun at myself too. I miss this. I miss this party. I missed it in the 60s. I missed it last year when the album dropped. And I'm just getting around to it now because somebody was nice enough to tweet it to me. And I thought it was a fun Music Monday story, especially since Earth Day. Right? All right. Let's see what's going on. Ace of Cups gets a first chance at an overdue debut. And this is from January, so this happened a minute ago. Here they are now. There's a picture of them now. And here they are in the 60s. So there you go. And this is decades after their original run in the 1960s in San Francisco. Joel Selvin remembers the San Francisco music scene of the late 60s as an especially fertile time for experimentation. There was tremendous hunger and openness for musical influence. World music, Indian music, rhythm and blues, jazz, and that was all new in the world of popular music. At the time, one band stood out for its talent and its unusual lineup. Ace of Cups just didn't feature a powerhouse female vocalist in the mold of Janis Joplin, but 5 women who sang, played their own instruments, and wrote their own music. Ace of Cups played their instruments with the same kind of accomplishment that the males did. They were on so many bills starting in the summer of 67, but they were a complete anomaly in the San Francisco hippie world. So these ladies are Mary Gannon, Marla Hunt, Denise Kaufman, Mary Ellen Simpson, and Diane Vitalesh, and they all met in the Haight-Ashbury district. They'd all been in other bands, but Gannon, who plays bass, says they weren't always treated as equals. So here's what Gannon said. I had been in a band called the Demon Lover, and I was supposed to be a backup singer and play the tambourine. It was like the man band. Gannon knew right away Ace of Cups was going to be different. We approached songs differently. I can remember the first day that Denise showed up and played a song, like she was already a songwriter. And I just think the fact that we were girls and she was a girl meant we weren't going to step on her music. So the band informally recorded its rehearsals and shows. They built a following, and they were playing venues such as the Fillmore, the Avalon Ballroom, and Winterland. Several labels expressed interest, but nothing ever happened. So after a few years, Ace of Cups called it quits. Now keep in mind, I know I'm pointing out the obvious here, so maybe this isn't necessary to point out, but, this was back in the 60s where it was pretty much record deal or bust. It wasn't like today where you can just kind of throw your music up wherever, and a lot of bands don't even have labels anymore these days. This was back in the 60s where if you didn't eventually have some kind of relationship, bend the ear of some kind of gatekeeper, you were stuck. There was really nothing else you could do other than gig locally. So, all right, back to this. So after a few years, they called it quits, and the members certainly never expected to reach faraway fans, but they did. Growing up in the late 70s and early 80s, I got fascinated with the San Francisco sound. Now, this is coming from Alec Paleo, an Englishman. So Alex scored every book that he could find on Jefferson Airplane and the Great Society and the Grateful Dead, and he kept hearing about this band called Ace of Cups. So he eventually got his hands on a few bootleg tapes. And when Paleo became the scout for a UK-based reissue label, coincidentally called Ace Records, he collaborated with Ace of Cups to release the band's rehearsals and live recordings. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So Ace of Cups' self-titled debut album came out in November of 2018. It's a double album featuring 4 of the band's original members, plus contributions from longtime friends, including Buffy St. Marie and the Grateful Dead's Bob Weir. Joel Sullivan says the talent and energy that set the band apart 50 years ago still shines through. Ace of Cups today are this vibrant, exciting time capsule that lives in the contemporary world. And for Gannon, the debut album is a full circle moment to where Ace of Cups began. We just happen to be girls playing music, having fun. What a cool story. I want to check out their album. I think that'd be really cool. Ace of Cups. Check them out. And, it's always really cool when you hear stories like this. Another story that's kind of similar to this one is a band called Death. If you have not seen that documentary, go see it. It's about arguably the first ever punk band, and it happened in Detroit, and it was 3 black guys playing rock and roll music in Detroit at a time where back then, if you were 3 black guys, you were supposed to be doing Motown. They didn't know what to make of 3 black guys playing this type of heavy rock and roll music. It was a different time. So those guys never really went anywhere, but years later, the world came looking for their music. And Ace of Cups, back then it was still a guy's game in the psychedelic rock world. They were told to just bang the tambourine and do backing vocals. They wanted to do more than that. They went under the radar, but years later, the world came looking. Those are beautiful stories. Those are beautiful stories about culture, beautiful stories about togetherness, beautiful stories about never giving up, about work, about art, about the bittersweet evolution of society, and about righting the wrongs that were committed years ago. These are cool stories, and this is my first introduction to Ace of Cups. NPR beat me to it, because I'm just not that hip, I'm really not. So that's a cool way to start Music Monday, especially since, hey, they came from the hippie movement, and Haight-Ashbury, the recording of this, it's Earth Day. Get your news on with Ron, don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron, don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today, You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your